Hi there, and welcome to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world. Conversations where we stay curious for a little bit longer about the issues, challenges, and opportunities which we are facing in our schools and in our communities. Today on the Educators Corner podcast, we're going to be talking about 5 myths about teaching internationally. With over 14,000 international schools educating nearly 7 million students and employing nearly 700,000 teachers, the international school sector has experienced a remarkable growth of over 8.5% in the last 5 years. That's figures according to ISC research. What that means is there is huge opportunity for teachers and leaders to teach and lead in a growing number of schools in virtually every country in the world. So we're going to dispel a few myths about teaching internationally, and who better than Laura Rigney, Director of School Services at Teach Horizons. Last year, she placed teachers and leaders in more than 76 countries. And before working for Teachers Horizons for 8 years, she was also a teacher. So, Laura, welcome to the Educators Corner podcast. How is your week shaping up?
Thank you very much, Kai. It's so nice to be here. I've been watching all your other podcasts and I do love hearing all the expertise and knowledge that comes out of them. I live in Ireland actually, and it's just turning spring, so it's beautiful. It feels like a great time of year to be here, but it's getting very busy as well. And just like you mentioned, the international school sector is growing, it's continually changing and evolving, and there's so many exciting things that are continually happening day by day and week by week at this time of year. So it's been a great week so far.
We're going to explore some myths about teaching internationally. And let's start with the first one. Um, and it's quite interesting. Somebody shared this with me a few years ago. They said, have you heard the saying, Kai, that international teachers, they're either misfits, missionaries, or mercenaries? Have you heard that said, Laura? Is that a thing? Is that a myth?
Yeah, I think it's an old-fashioned saying that I think typically maybe 20 years ago, the idea was that the international school teachers were jokers. They couldn't cut it at home. They went overseas and they were either misfits, so perhaps they didn't kind of fit into the system that they were teaching in, or missionaries driven by a sense of purpose beyond just a job, or mercenaries where maybe they were just pursuing financial incentives, lifestyle benefits, or career advancement. And I think it's a funny concept because when you meet all the teachers that you start working with abroad, there are often reasons why people are motivated to go away. In terms of which one I fit into, I don't really fit into one of them, but I'd say I fit into a bit of all three, really, because after university, I had the opportunity to go into banking, but I chose to do a PGC through Teach First. I worked in North London, and it was really an amazing organisation with an amazing mission that really resonated with me. So in that sense, I'd consider myself part mission, kind of wanting to go a bit beyond just having a job. But I also had debts to pay, right? So after working in London, I did go abroad to Egypt, which some might have said was a brave move during 2011 because there were lots of things going on in Egypt at that time. But in many ways, I was a bit of a mercenary there because I was financially incentivized to go and sort out my debts. And I suppose finally, I'm from a small place called Guernsey in the Channel Islands, which is really tiny. And I'd never really had the desire to move back to my home, so to speak, or to have a job for life, which many of the teachers in the island do get settled into a job. So I just was looking for adventure and never wanting to stay in one place. So I think I was a bit of a misfit in that sense. But I wonder which one you fitted into.
Oh, scary question. I think I'd have to say I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission, I think, to show whether I'm in the classroom or whether I'm leading a school or whether I'm creating a learning opportunity for a group of teachers or school leaders. I'm on a mission to think about doing things differently so we can do them better. So I'm very interested in innovation, and that's my definition of innovation. And I guess I'm also maybe a bit of a misfit because I think when I first came out here 14 years ago, I felt I could probably succeed in that mission about leading a school maybe in a little bit of a different way. I could do that. I could achieve that mission more successfully in an international context than I could do back at home. So yeah,
Mm.
I'm a missionary, and am I a misfit? Quite possibly.
I
Uh,
think one thing I would say about it though is that saying it, you know, I think teaching internationally is very much a highly regarded career opportunity now, more so
mm,
maybe than it was before. There's a lot more focus on professional development, and actually teachers that have gone abroad, it's not just like you're going abroad for a couple of years anymore. It's actually that you could go back, you could come back to your home in the future and bring back that amazing international knowledge and sort of experiences to the classroom and the students back home. So I think it's much more of a let's say, a legitimate career path than maybe it was 20 years ago.
I think, and it sounds like you too, Laura, we can dispel this myth that the idea that we're jokers, or this is the place, this is the graveyard of opportunity. I think I've met some of the most ambitious people in my career internationally.
Mm.
So I think there's absolutely brilliant teachers and leaders in the UK, and there are also brilliant and teachers and leaders working internationally. So I'm very proud to be part of that profession that is increasingly working so extensively in an international context.
It looks like we've dispelled that one now, which is great. And I just want to move on to a second one, which we hear a lot of from younger teachers. They often ask, can I do my ECT year abroad? So the myth is, I can't do my ECT year abroad. What do you think about that?
Well, the great news is that if you're an early careers teacher, that's the ECT bit, you can do that in an international school, but not in every international school. So the first criteria is you need to check that the school you're looking to work at has had a successful BSO inspection. That's British Schools Overseas, and those schools are the list of those schools is on the DFE website. So check that the school you're looking at has had a successful British Schools Overseas inspection in the last 3 years. And secondly, that they are prepared to accept you as an early careers teacher, and they're happy to put you through that 2-year program. So you do need a BSA inspection as a school, and you need to be prepared to take that on. And it's only BSO schools who you can do your ECT year through, which will then be fully accredited with the Department for Education in England.
Mm.
Got any
I
more
think
thoughts on that, Laura?
you're absolutely right. Whilst any international school could technically employ an ECT, there are actually some visa restrictions in some countries you need to be aware of. For example, in Indonesia, you can't join a school without 5 years post-qualification experience. So some countries would be close to you. The accreditation to run the ECT program is limited to around 280 British international schools. And like you mentioned, they have to have gone through the inspection within the last 6 years, have a full membership of at least one of the following Department for Educational membership associations like Fabisia, COBIS, BSME, and also be working with a DFE registered appropriate body to run the induction. I think above and beyond that, it does mean that the schools have to put a lot of support network in place. I'm sure you remember the early days of teaching. You need to have a mentor, you need kind of a support network around you. So it does require quite a lot of resources. And if the school can't meet these criteria, then they can't be certified to run the program. And I think the reason it's quite important to decide whether you want to go through the ECT inductions, because once you've done it and you're certified, you're basically at the same level as everybody else that stayed in England, and you have it on your teaching regulatory agency record. So you can transition back into state mainland schools or independent schools in England later in your career and not be further down the pay scale. So that's what we would suggest to our teachers, is to do a bit of research into it, look at the schools that can offer.
So that's sort of on the professional side. I mean, if you are an early career teacher, I think there are other things that you need to think very carefully about as well. And I think one of those is, assuming you're early in your career, and not all ECTs will be early in their career, of course. But if you're, let's say, young, single, and in your early to mid 20s, think very carefully about the location that you're going to,
Mm.
and is that going to be a location that, as a young professional, you're going to feel comfortable with, that it's safe, that you're going to be able to do the things you'd like to do socially outside of school, because countries, cities, towns, vary tremendously right across the world. And while the school might seem absolutely fantastic and they can do the ECT program, think about as a young professional how you're going to adapt to that new environment. That's also going to be really important to you.
Apart from the professional side, I think the social side that you mentioned earlier on is really important. And sometimes we see teachers that have hopped around a little bit because they haven't been able to settle, and maybe it's because they haven't had a chance to date, or just little everyday things that they might want to do in their personal life. So I think it's really important just to consider, are there other teachers in the same sort of age profile as you there? And you can ask at the point of offer, you can ask HR to connect with a teacher that might be in a similar situation to you, to have a chat about what life is like on the ground before you accept offers.
So let's move on to a third myth that I think we've both heard quite a lot, is that some people say there are tier one schools, there are tier two schools, maybe there are even tier three schools and so on. That is sort of this hierarchy, and that you really only want to get a job in a tier one school. Laura, what do you think about that analysis of the international sector?
It's a really funny one because that isn't actually a universally defined definition of what a tier one school constitutes. And there's a sort of illusion about these tiers of schools in the international school system, and maybe an element of sort of snobbery of, I want to be in a tier one school for my next position. But tier one schools typically might be considered as having excellent academic results, higher than average salaries compared to the norm of that city or country, and just really good reputations. Whereas tier two schools might pay slightly less, but possibly they might offer a more supportive, enjoyable, fulfilling work experience, depending on what you're looking for. And I think what I would say as an educator, and I'm sure you would agree with this, is that education is about making a difference. That can happen anywhere. It doesn't matter what tier school you're in. I think the goal is teaching is what matters. And I've worked in a fee-paying school, a non-fee-paying school, a school that pays a slightly higher average salary, out in a school where it paid a lower salary, and I was happiest, probably at the happiest point of all the schools I've worked at. At the end of the day, kids are the same anywhere. They've all got challenges and aspirations. And I think depending on what you're looking for, you need to delve a bit deeper into getting beyond just pigeonholing schools into a tier. And just a final point I'd like to make on this is just challenging the myth further by saying that it's actually really hard to get roles in the perceived tier one schools. They're very well established. The average tenure tends to be long, turnover's low. So vacancies don't come up a lot. And I think the average tenure for these sorts of schools could be 8 to 10, even more years. And so when a role comes up, it's highly competitive to get a role. So just if you're looking for your first international job, it is quite hard to envisage transitioning straight into a school like that. What do you think about it all?
I think building on that point, Laura, about low turnover, if you're a teacher who's looking for significant career opportunity, if you're going into schools, and I can think of a number around the region where maybe the turnover of staff is typically less than 5%, think about what opportunities are going to exist in that school in terms of for career progression. Not great. I mean, we use a benchmark here in Muscat and also in Slala. We aim to sort of we aim for our turnover to be somewhere between 10 to 15%. And we feel comfortable when our turnover is somewhere between 10 to 15%, because it means that we haven't got huge numbers of staff leaving every year, which can also be destabilizing. However, we do have a reasonable turnover of staff, which means that on a fairly regular basis, both in our primary school and in our senior school, there are career opportunities that are making themselves available for a range of staff. And then if you maybe even think about that on an even bigger scale, I mean, there are some fantastic models now, certainly in the UAE and other parts of the world, where there may be 4, 5, 6,000 students in a school. And they're sometimes starting off with maybe 3,000 students, and those schools need huge numbers of staff to obviously make them successful. And I think those schools also have a lot of opportunity for responsibility, but also if you're in a school of 6 to 7,000 students, there's going to be quite a large number of staff there. And so in terms of socially, the opportunity to meet people who you work with, who you maybe connect with and socialize with, there's going to be huge scope for that in a large school like that, which is maybe just starting off, than maybe a really well established school where there's very low turnover. So I think it goes a lot more deeper than is it a tier one or tier two? Think very carefully about the demographic, both on the staff side and the student side. Think very carefully about the turnover and the opportunities that might be there for you if you're interested in career development. I don't know, Laura, what do you want to add anything more to that?
Yeah, I think almost a bit like in the UAE, the founders model. I think Kai, we were talking about this the other day. Some of the
Mm.
schools, just speaking about people like Matthew Bearfield and James McDonald, who are in these sorts of schools, taking lots and lots of teachers, but giving them opportunities too. And we call that a stepping stone school. It's a great opportunity to be able to get experience, make your mark, develop curriculum, also make extracurricular activities, take on training and growth opportunities. Sometimes these sorts of schools also run internship programs, so teaching assistants that want to be learning on the job to become a teacher in the future, and you can help train the local staff. There's so many opportunities there that you might not get in a bigger school. And I think there's also a type of school that we haven't spoken about yet, and that's the sort of founding, being involved in the setup of a school. And I'm just thinking of a school that we're working with now called Ellesmere College, Doha, that's just about to open in September. This is an amazing new campus. The recruitment's being headed up by Paul Schofield, who used to be the principal at British School Kuwait. He's looking for very sort of innovative and passionate teachers to help get the school going from the bottom up and leave a stamp on that success of that school and contribute to everything from picking the furniture to all the way through developing what the uniform is going to look like. And that's an amazing opportunity for teachers that maybe haven't had that chance yet. So there's so many different types of models of school. I think the tier system's a bit outdated now.
Just speaking to Grania O'Reilly back on episode 10 about founder schools. I mean, she set up a significant number of schools around the world. And she talked about the wonderful experience and the camaraderie that you create of that group of colleagues who found a school and are the initial group of staff. And you go through a sort of real bonding process there professionally, which is probably you don't get that experience in an established school like myself. Or I guess similarly, if you go into a school, and unfortunately there are plenty out there, where a school that's really struggling, maybe is in not in a particularly good position, and if you're part of the team that helps take that school from being in a particularly difficult place into a much better place, there again is huge professional reward that you can achieve from helping turn a school around as a teacher, as a leader. So think very carefully. It's a very diverse world, just like the UK is a very diverse landscape for different types of schools. The world is even more diverse. And I think maybe think very carefully about that question, which is quite hard to answer sometimes. What do you really want? And do your research to, if you can answer that question, what do you really want? Really try to dig deep and find out what it is and that you're going into in terms of the school or the schools that you're looking at.
Kai, one thing about as a principal, I'd imagine when you see CVs and you know that that teacher's been in either helping turn around a failing school or helping develop a school from the bottom up, you'd know that that candidate's got a lot of successful softer skills as well, like resilience, that sort of proactive, positive attitude, and can wear many hats and take on many different responsibilities. And I think that in itself also gives a great signal about the kind of candidate that's in front of you.
Oh yeah, if you can talk about your role in turning around or help to turn around a school or help to found a school, that can be a great story to talk about at an interview, which helps to portray you in a very authentic way. We're now going to go on to myth 4 and myth 5. Myth 5, I think you're going to find absolutely fascinating. We're going to move into the financial territory, but we'll come to that in a moment. But first of all, Laura, before we go into myth 5, myth 4. Teaching abroad is only for young single professionals because living overseas with dependents is just too hard. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely no secret that there is a higher demand for young single teachers because they're often more affordable and they bring fresh ideas into a school. From a business and cost perspective, I'd say single hires are cheaper. However, what I've come to realize, and I've got children of my own as well, is that many schools actually seek out families because they offer stability, they tend to stay a long time, they're very invested in both their own child's education, but also the education of the students they're teaching. And I really feel that a balance of both in a school environment is important. What I would say, though, is families with multiple children, so 3 or 4 children, probably might have fewer opportunities just because they do, unless you're in a teaching couple and in some areas. But there still are opportunities. And I'm thinking of a boarding school environment that we work with now in Malaysia, where they're actively looking for families that can stay, because the average tenure of staff is 8 years. And it's usually coincides with when the students finished their IGCSE or A-level period is when the teacher might move on. So it's a great thing for a school. I'd say staff stay on and are more invested in the school and wider community, which is always a good thing for retention and the cost of rehiring. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a huge amount of truth in that. Is that if you recruit a quality teaching couple and they've got children and they're happy at the school, there's a good chance they're going to stay a while, which is great for stability. But again, I think like any school that I would like to lead, I think the more a balance you have of staff in every age group, the more diversity you've got, the better it is. But it's certainly in our context here in Muscat and Salalah, there's great opportunity for young single professionals. There's great opportunity for families, and there's also plenty of opportunity and support for maybe teachers who are in the twilight of their career. And it's really fantastic, I think, that a lot of more sort of mature teachers in the twilight of their career, they can thrive in many international schools, and they're very welcoming to international schools. So I think, yeah, a mixed demographic is ideal. But I think, like you say, I think check if you've got a number of children, check what the tuition fee situation is, because that can vary very much from school to school. And there are schools that offer 100% tuition. There are others who don't offer that. There's sometimes limits on the number of children that would be supported. So just again, do your research and check before you go through, fully blown into the recruitment process, that you know what there might be for you and your family.
Just above and beyond the salary, though, even the peripheral benefits like visa, medical insurance, what housing units are offered, those are things that need to be considered too, because some of our schools and some schools around the world will offer the full family package with all of those things included for 2 children plus a spouse or more. And some will just offer the other benefits for the teacher, and then it will be at the teacher's own cost to be able to fund. So they're open to children, but you would have to pay visa, medical, and other associated costs, which can be quite large depending on what country you're going to. And it sort of leads us into myth 5, I think, as well, about kind of cost of living and salary savings potential.
Myth number 5: teaching abroad is financially lucrative. True or false, Laura?
It's like quite a lot of the questions we've been talking about today. It very much depends on the person, what kind of life they want to lead. And I've done a lot of research actually into salaries, monthly sort of average salaries, which we're going to discuss today. I would say, well, let me ask you first. Let me ask you, if I was a teacher saying to you, Kai, I quite want to come to Oman. Do you think I'll be able to save in your country? How would you answer that?
I would answer that by saying it depends. And actually, the way I explain that is that you can go from zero. You can live in a sort of 0-star lifestyle to 7-star, and you can interchange across that range as much as you like. But the more you live in the 0-star lifestyle, the more you'll be able to save. The more you live in the 7 stars style of lifestyle, the less you'll be able to save, and maybe you won't be able to save anything at all. So it does depend very much on your lifestyle. But there is no doubt that if you manage your finances carefully, you can save quite a considerable amount of money over a period of time. But I'm now looking at a table that Teacher Horizons are very carefully put together. And so let's sort of do a bit of a world tour, a bit of a global perspective. Let's move away from Oman. So I'm looking at this table, and perhaps if there's demand out there, we'll share this table with listeners in the show notes. But I'm looking at a range of locations around the world. I'm looking at salaries first of all,
Mm.
and I'm looking at gross salaries, so before tax, monthly. And when I'm looking at this table, it looks like the lowest gross salary you could expect typically would be around about £1,500 a month. So that is a salary that you might get in a number of locations. But the highest salary would be around about £6,000 a month. So that's quite a range. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this table in terms of those figures?
Yeah, so I'm actually originally a maths teacher. So we looked at the sort of interquartile range of the upper quartile and the lower quartile. So that really means the middle 50% of data removing outliers. And we looked at a range of countries that typically candidates will come to us and they'll say UAE, Singapore, Hong Kong, the main three sort of countries that often get referenced. Then we thought about some countries like China, India, Southeast Asia as a whole, Cambodia, where the markets are growing and there's a lot of potential job opportunities. Thailand, also Malaysia. We put together some data about average monthly salaries, removing all the outliers as well. So, of course, just to preempt what I'm about to say, in every one of the countries that we're going to mention today, there will be the extremes, the schools that are paying, sort of off the scale. We call them the golden handcuff schools, the ones where you're getting paid so much that it's actually very hard to ever want to leave those schools. But removing those sorts of considerations, let's say you're a teacher right now in England and looking at the kind of pay scales in England, you might be on 30 to 46,000 out of London or 36 to 56,000 inner London. That brings you to between 2,500 to 3,800 pre-tax or 3,000 to 4,700 pre-tax if you're in London. So a lot of the teachers want to compare like for like, and they want to say, I want to get paid exactly the same as what I'm getting paid in England. Well, of course, that just doesn't work comparing like for like because the cost of living index is really important to consider. So you mentioned at the lowest kind of scale, somewhere like Cambodia might pay 1,500 to 2,500 pounds on average, but the cost of living index is low. It's around 60% lower than the benchmark of 100, which would be around sort of New York, London standard cost of living. So you're actually able to, your money goes 60% further than what it would do in England. And what we ask our teachers to do and leaders to do is look at the cost of living index, look at the quality of life index as well. Quality of life index above 100 means that you're getting a good enough or more than or better quality of life compared to what you'd be getting back home. And then compare all those different factors. So I always use Cambodia because I've got a lot of friends that worked in Cambodia. Many of my friends were on £25,000 salary on average, but they were able to save £10,000 salary at the same time because of the cost of living. So just that kind of consideration needs to be thought about.
Okay, let's just unpack that a little bit. I mean, you're a very fast-thinking maths teacher, very dexterous around these figures. So if I'm a mercenary and I'm looking at this data that we're both looking at and say we'll share it after the podcast. If I'm a mercenary, it looks like I should be heading for somewhere like Hong Kong, where I could expect to earn, let's say, in the interquartile range. So that doesn't include the top 25% or the low 25%, but sort of some middle average around 3,500 to £6,000 a month. So that might sound really great. Let's say I get a job in Hong Kong at £6,000 a month. I'm feeling really pleased with myself. I'm getting paid more than I would even if I was working in London. Really happy with that. I then need to look at what you're saying. I then need to look at the cost of living index. So what's our table telling us about the cost of living index in Hong Kong, Laura?
Yeah, about 25% cheaper than New York or London. So that sounds great. But what you need to consider is whether or not that 6,000 is including a housing allowance, or whether or not, again, some schools will provide furnished accommodation. So that is disposable income, of course, once you take taxes into account. So I think there's just lots of other considerations because the biggest drain on your income will be rent. And that goes without saying as well for Singapore. If you get a furnished accommodation, brilliant. And if you're getting £6,000 on top of that, brilliant. But if you're not and you have to pay for your accommodation, then you might be looking at £1,500 in addition or coming out of your salary to pay for your housing. And of course, if you've got a larger family unit, you're going to be needing more than that. So I think there's just lots of other considerations about what exactly is included within the contract.
So I'm still in Hong Kong. I'm really happy on my 6,000, but yes, like you say, I need to look at the cost of living index. So for Hong Kong, it's about 75. So 25 below the 100 for London or New York. But then what you're also suggesting, you need to look at the quality of life. And
Mm.
what's your index telling us about quality of life in Hong Kong? What's it saying about that?
Yeah, I think Hong Kong appeals a lot to teachers coming out of their home country because culturally it's quite a lot easier to adapt. There's a lot of different industries in Hong Kong. There's lots of different people coming in to work in the city. So quality of life is on a par really with where you're at back home. But what I would say is we contrast Hong Kong with China. The cost of living index is half what it is in Hong Kong, but you can still get really high salaries. On the flip side, the cultural adaptation of going into a city in, well, it depends on which city you go to, but obviously China, like Lisa Grace said about the UAE, is not a homogenous place. You've got a lot of different cities, a lot of different experiences. So kind of if you're asking me where would I go for savings potential for lower cost of living, China versus Hong Kong, it would be China because we're talking about a 70% saving on a New York or London sort of salary versus a 25% saving, a fairly
Yeah.
similar salary range.
Okay. So you need to not only think about what you're going to be earning, but how far that money is going to be sort of stretching each month. And if you're going internationally because you want to save money, then the amount you save is going to be really important. Just on this, the quality of life piece, I mean, forgive me for stating the obvious, but if you're going somewhere like Hong Kong or Singapore or quite a large number of large Southeast Asian cities, it's quite likely that your only accommodation option is going to be an apartment living. And if you're comfortable with apartment living, that's great. But maybe if you've got pets or young children, you want to think very carefully, not only uh, how much you'll be spending on accommodation, but what type of accommodation you'll be able to get with that allowance. And there are some parts of the world, I think mostly most of Western and Central Europe, where you probably won't get an accommodation allowance at all.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's a really good point, and I think maybe challenging that about Southeast Asia and parts of Asia, you might get a place like Thailand where you can get an apartment, but you can also get a big villa with a pool. So you can really choose the kind of unit you might want to live in, obviously for a whole lot cheaper. I saw a statistic recently that said the average cost of an apartment in Thailand was £182 a month, and with a school sort of salary range between 80 to 100,000, 130,000 Thai baht monthly, that brings your income to 1,800 to £3,000, which if you're talking about your outgoings, which will be negligible, you can save a lot in Thailand and lead a very good quality of life. So I think what we would always suggest is that you look at your potential outgoings, you look at your tax rate, then you'll only then be able to realize your savings potential after all that's been taken into account.
So it's salary, it's cost of living index, cost of the quality of life index. You might want to look at the crime index in terms of safety and the whole tax position. So you need to do a lot of research so you really know what you're
Mm.
going into.
Just to add to that, I think one thing I noticed, and I'm sure anyone that's moved abroad would also resonate with this, is that when you first move abroad, it's quite expensive to set up your apartment. You need to go and furnish
Mm,
it, get the soft furnishings.
yeah.
The savings potential never really gets realised until the second or third year, or even beyond that. And I think also because you're excited to be in a new place, you want to socially go out and do as much as you possibly can and travel. Um, but I think what the data table which we can release is showing us is that the best places for savings, taking all other factors into consideration, is India, China, Malaysia, and Eastern Europe. And the best for high salaries, kind of raw net salaries, are Hong Kong, UAE, and Singapore, but comes with high costs. Accommodation being a huge drain on that, so you need to look into that more. Best for balanced living, sort of a combination of cost of living index and quality of life index would be Thailand, Southeast Asia, and maybe parts of Eastern Europe too. And maybe challenging for savings then overall. Obviously, UK kind of doesn't come up very high on our savings chart. Singapore and Western Europe, and that is mainly attributed to tax. So in Western Europe, you've got taxes of up to 30% on average. Eastern Europe, the average tax rate goes down to 15% on a sort of average teacher salary. So there's a lot to kind of unpack from that table, but I just want to also mention that in each country, there's a lot of contextual information that maybe you might not know if you're a teacher looking to go abroad. For example, in Malaysia, there's something called the Employee Provident Fund, which is a savings program that employees and teachers contribute towards, and that can mean up to 25% of your salary is put away for you. So at the every month. And so there's lots of other things to take into account when you're looking at trying to save. But that's where, people can help you out with any questions that you might have.
This table is fascinating, and I think one of the things I like about data is that it provokes a lot of thought and conversation. So I'm sure when we share this table with listeners, it will provoke a lot of thought and discussion around the world in the international school sector. So if I was to ask you, Laura, I mean, you've taught in a number of parts of the world. You've taught in the UK, you've taught in Cairo, you've taught in UAE. Where would you head next?
Oh, that's a great question. I think my answer would change if you'd asked me 15 years ago. But now, because I've got family and young children, I'd always be prioritizing where's going to be the best for them. I lived in UAE for 8 years, absolutely loved my experience there. I would definitely go back. But I think because I've always missed out on going to Asia, never gone to Asia before. I'm really fascinated by going to Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, somewhere like that. So that would be where I'd be heading next if I had an opportunity.
When you were abroad for those 8 years, what did you miss about home?
I think just having your family and friends and that support network around you. I think when you move abroad, you have a different type of support network. It's mostly new friends and colleagues, but just the people that know you, the people that you grew up with, people you can be truly yourself with. It's not easy to nip back and just go to a wedding or a family event. So you do miss out and you make sacrifices by living abroad. And I think that's something that you have to know about when you're first looking to move. What did you miss do you go back to the UK often? And what do you miss about
Yeah, I
living?
go back. I go back to the UK several times a year. The thing that always strikes me coming from this part of the world, which is obviously desert landscape, is you fly into Heathrow and just the green. I mean, yeah, it's sometimes a bit grey as well, but the green is really striking. And I love actually, especially when I go back in the summer, from a very hot, humid environment where you're spending most of your life in air-conditioned environments. You go back to the UK and you can walk outside. I mean, I would have never appreciated that 14 years ago. The fact that you can just walk outside, I can go and walk on the South Downs where I live in Sussex. I can go to fascinating places like London. And it's interesting, when you speak to people in Oman, you speak to local people here, Omanis, so many Omanis love going to London or dream of going to London.
Mm.
And for me, also, going to the theatre, uh, experiencing and engaging in the culture that you get right across the UK, and like you say, meeting friends and family who you've not seen for a while. So while in the sort of international sector narrative, we hear about lots of people leaving the UK to go internationally. What maybe isn't so well documented is there is a regular return of teachers back to the UK. And I'd say 90%, I talked about 10 to 15% turnover from my school every year. 90% of those colleagues, when they're leaving here, are going back to the UK.
Mm.
Um, I think the international adventure is fantastic, and you learn a huge amount from it. And there are plenty of people who would say they would never go back to the UK, but there are many of us who, like
Mm.
yourself, have gone international and have gone back to the UK, and maybe you'll go international again one day. Do you think, Laura? Do
Yeah,
you think that's a possibility?
yeah, never say never. And I think you're really right. The coming back, let's say coming back home. I'm actually living in Ireland now, where my husband's from. But there's a lot of psychological things that are at play when you move back. The sort of, we call it the reverse culture shock. You're coming back, you don't really know where you belong anymore. You're missing your old friends and family, your old life. It's hard to adjust, I would say. It is really hard to adjust at first, but I think on balance, when you see how the kids are happy and with their family, it feels like the right move for now.
Okay, welcome back to the Bottom Line It Round, where we ask our guest a number of quick-fire questions, where we are asking for no more than one sentence. One word is quite enough. Laura, how are you feeling? Are you ready for the bottom line
Yeah,
round?
I always listen to this on your podcast, Kai, and I think to myself, I'm getting a bit nervous now because yeah, let's see how we go.
So there we go. You're going to be fine. And we are going to adjust this slightly because of your experience. So we're going to ask you for some quick tips on a number of areas for teachers applying for international posts around the world based on your experience. So tip number one, dress code for an international school interview. What would you say?
Okay, always dress for your first day at work. Be professional from the outset.
Number two, preparing for an interview.
Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. That's what all I would say is just make sure you've got really good examples to use when asked any questions.
Number three, email etiquette when accepting or rejecting offers.
Yeah, always get back to a school in a timely fashion and thank them for the offer, thank the HR lead for helping schedule the calls, and always just keep to the timescales that the school set.
And on social media accounts, your own personal social media accounts.
Yeah, closing off social media accounts is a given, I think, both at schools and as a candidate, because you can bet anything that the schools and agencies will be checking up on you and doing extensive checks on your social media history.
Okay, I'm going to ask you three more questions, Laura. Number one, what's the most irritating part about being a recruiter?
Oh, I think you nailed it there when you call me a recruiter. The word recruiter gets such a bad reputation for somebody that's very commission driven, doesn't consider the personal, individual needs of the school and the candidate. Yeah, recruitment in an industry like education has to be highly personalised, and both sides need to be able to trust you. So I think the label itself.
So what should I call you instead?
You can call me a that's a great idea. A game changer.
A game changer. Laura, the game changer. What is the one piece of advice that you can give to any teacher who's applying for a role in an international school at the moment?
The speed at which everything happens at this time of year is really fast. So you need to have everything ready, your DBS, police checks, safeguarding training certificates, references, documents. This will avoid, and make sure also your passport is in date as well. This will avoid sort of bottlenecks and hold-ups later down the process when you're getting your visa sorted.
And finally, how do you unwind at the end of a day, Laura, as a game changer?
Oh, well, I'll be honest, Kai, I've got the 4 children under the age of 10, so it's very hard to fully unwind and relax. I often find myself working in the evenings, but I do really enjoy spending time with my family, and I absolutely love music. I used to play the saxophone when I was younger, so I've got a special love of jazz, but I love all forms of music. So it really helps me to kind of get into a zone depending on how I'm feeling.
Okay, who would you most like to see this coming summer if you're going to a festival?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I quite like artists that are no longer alive. But if I was thinking of one amazing concert, I'd love to go to Glastonbury because I really like EDM house dance music. So anything to do with a big festival and Glastonbury, that'll be the goal one day.
Thank you, Laura, for your time today talking about international school recruitment. You've given our listeners so many tips and advice. You've given us so much insight into this world. It is really exciting. It is really dynamic. And we're lucky that we've got game changers like you who are helping teachers around the sector find their next opportunity. So thanks very much for your time, your energy and your insight. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Kai. It's lovely to be able to come on. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world, the podcast where we stay curious for just a little bit longer. The Educators Corner podcast is hosted by me, Kai Vasher, and produced by Stuart Pardoe, Zoe Snell and Marion James, and by BSM BSS Productions.